Hi there, my name is Justin Hibbard and welcome to Politics in Plain English. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Politics in Plain English, I always begin with a question, and today's question is, what's the process for impeaching the president? And before I get to that question, if you're new to Politics in Plain English, what I do is take complex political ideas as well as current events and break them down so they're easy to understand and digest in an explanation that's 18 minutes or less. I take out the hyper emotion and all the spin and try to stick with data and facts, presenting all sides fairly. My goal is that you become an informed voter because I truly believe an informed voter is the most powerful voter and the ideal of our democracy. If you haven't done so already, would you do me a huge favor and subscribe? You can subscribe to the Politics in Plain English podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I also do a video of these podcasts, which you can find on my YouTube channel, which is Justin R. Hibbard. And that's my handle as well on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Justin R. Hibbard and you can follow me there as well. And lastly, I try and do a podcast episode once each week, but I do a lot more writing. And if you'd like to get my articles in your inbox, you can subscribe at justinrhibbard.substack.com. Thanks so much for doing that. Now, let's get back to our question at hand. What's the process for impeaching the president? First, let's start with a little bit of context. At the time of this recording, Donald Trump's supporters attempted a coup, an insurrection, a riot at least, by storming the Capitol building while Congress was certifying the Electoral College's votes. Even though there's less than 2 weeks left of President Trump's time in the White House, a number of congressional leaders from both sides, Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the aisle have called for his removal. House Leader Nancy Pelosi basically laid out an ultimatum. She said Donald Trump can resign, Vice President Mike Pence can invoke the 25th Amendment, which I talked about in the episode entitled, Can the Vice President Invoke the 25th Amendment to Oust the President? And if those two options don't happen, Nancy Pelosi said that she would file articles of impeachment against the president. And on Monday, January 11th, that's exactly what happened. If you recall, this wouldn't be the first time either. The beginning of 2020 seems like a decade ago, but it was only a year ago at the time of this recording that Donald Trump was impeached on 2 charges, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. You might be thinking, but I thought he was acquitted. Why are you saying that he got impeached? Impeached or impeachment doesn't mean he was found guilty. It just means that he was charged with a crime. When someone allegedly commits a crime, the district attorney's office will file charges against that person. It doesn't mean that they're guilty. It means that they believe that they're guilty, and the matter will go to the courts for a final decision. In the same way, impeachment is merely the charging of a president, a vice president, a judge, or other member of Congress with committing a crime or abusing their position. There have been 3 presidents who have been impeached: Andrew Johnson in 1868, Bill Clinton in 1998, and Donald Trump in 2019. And all 3 were acquitted. You may wonder why I didn't include Richard Nixon. Well, in the case of Nixon, the House Judiciary Committee recommended 3 articles of impeachment, but Nixon resigned before the House could vote to officially charge him or impeach him with those crimes. And that's an important detail, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. I also didn't include James Buchanan in 1860 for a similar reason. A committee was assigned to investigate him and decide whether or not to recommend articles of impeachment. And in the end, they called his administration the most corrupt in presidential history, but that he didn't do anything to warrant impeachment. Though all 3 presidents, 5 if you count Nixon and Buchanan, have escaped conviction of impeachment, there have been 8 federal impeachment convictions, all of whom were judges. All in all, the House of Representatives has initiated impeachment proceedings 62 times between 1789 and 2021. It'll be 63 if Donald Trump is impeached again. And if Donald Trump is impeached a second time, he will be the only federal government official to have ever been impeached on 2 separate occasions. So let's talk about how impeachment works. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution states, quote, "The House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment." In other words, the House of Representatives has to be the chamber that initiates impeachment. The Senate can't do it. The Supreme Court can't do it. The Vice President can't do it. It has to come from the House of Representatives. Now, typically, the House of Representatives will have an investigation inside of a committee, and the committee will officially draft up articles of impeachment and lay out their case against the president. Then that is taken to the whole House of Representatives for debate and a vote whether or not to officially charge or impeach the president. And what they'll do is usually vote on each article or each charge separately. However, in the case of this 2021 impeachment possibility, the House did not form a special committee to investigate this. The main reason is that there's really no time. The president is going to be out of office in just over a week at the time of this recording, and having incited a riot on the U.S. Capitol, there's a reason to remove him quickly before anything else could possibly happen. Now, what you'll find is that the Constitution is actually quite vague in some places, and so it doesn't spell out exactly how this process works. Rather, it provides Congress a lot of leeway for interpretation and application. So what has historically happened is that once the House of Representatives votes to impeach the president, they assign House managers. And these are generally representatives from the party that initiated the impeachment. And many times, these individuals are former prosecutors and lawyers who are no stranger to court proceedings. These House managers take the articles of impeachment to the Senate. And while the Constitution gives the House the power of impeachment, Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 says, quote, "The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments," end quote. And this means that the actual trial to determine the president's guilt or innocence takes place in the Senate. The House managers act as the prosecutors, the president chooses lawyers as his defense team, and the senators become the jurors. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over the trial. Now, as I said earlier, the Constitution is quite vague in regard to the details, so senators have a lot of leeway in how they conduct the trial. They could decide on only giving each side an hour to present their case, or as was the case in the 2020 impeachment trial of Donald Trump, they could give each side days to present their case. In the end, the senators will vote, and it requires a 2/3 majority vote to convict the president, not just a simple majority. What does a guilty verdict do to the president? That answer is found in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7. It says, quote, "Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States, but the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law." In other words, a conviction on impeachment doesn't mean that the president goes to jail. It means that they are removed from office and they're disqualified from any future position in government. However, there's one other part. They're also subject to indictment. There's been lots of debate over time about whether a sitting president can be charged with a federal crime by, say, the FBI. And the general belief, again, the Constitution is not always the most clear, is that no, a sitting president can't be charged with a federal crime. The process of charging the president is through impeachment. However, should the president be impeached and convicted, removed from office, it opens them up for indictment by law enforcement agencies, who then can try the president in a court of law, and a judge can sentence the president to, say, prison time. I mentioned earlier that Richard Nixon resigned before the House could vote on the articles of impeachment, and once he resigned, the House of Representatives dropped the matter. This is a key and crucial point. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution states that the president, quote, "shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment." In other words, a president has the extraordinary power of pardoning anyone charged or convicted of federal crimes. However, there is one exception. If Congress is in the process or has done impeachment hearings, a president cannot pardon that individual. So because the House did not continue with impeachment after Richard Nixon resigned, his successor, Gerald Ford, was able to pardon the former President Richard Nixon. If the House would have continued with the process of impeachment, there likely would have been no opportunity to pardon Nixon. There are other reasons why a president might want to resign rather than face impeachment. For one, a president is entitled to a handsome retirement package, including a pension that's around $220,000, transition expenses, staff and office expenses, including the ability to hire staff at around $100,000 a year per person, medical insurance for life, including the ability to use military facilities, and of course, Secret Service protection. Presidents who are removed from office by impeachment forfeit those benefits. Congress would like nothing more than to have the president resign rather than go through impeachment proceedings. Impeachment is a political process. It's highly and has always been highly contentious and politically divisive. History gives this impression that Richard Nixon was guilty and would have easily been impeached, but it took a couple of brave Republicans to break ranks and say that they were going to impeach the Republican president. One of the first to do so was Representative Larry Hogan Sr. of Maryland, and likely due to his decision to impeach Nixon, he didn't win re-election. Voting to acquit a president who is likely guilty isn't popular, and voting to oust an elected president, member of your own party, is also not popular. And so Congress would love nothing more than the president to resign and spare them from looking bad one way or another. It's likely that party leaders have had a number of conversations already with the Trump administration urging him to resign. Lastly, this whole situation brings up one more question, and that is, can Congress impeach a president who is no longer in office? With only a few days left, it seems unrealistic that a full trial in the Senate would even be possible. What would happen if the House of Representatives votes to impeach Donald Trump, but his term, which ends at noon on January 20th, is over before the Senate can start or finish a trial? The Constitution does not limit impeachment to only a sitting president. And if you think about it, it makes sense. What if the president murdered someone on their last day in office? It would make sense that Congress could in fact impeach a president for a crime they committed in office after their term was up. John Adams, the second president, once said on the floor of the House of Representatives, "I hold myself so long as I have the breath of life in my body, amendable to impeachment by this House for everything I did during the time I held any public office." In other words, John Adams believed that at any point in his lifetime, he could be subject to impeachment for anything he did while he served in office. Should President Donald Trump not resign or not be removed through Vice President Mike Pence invoking the 25th Amendment, it looks as though Donald Trump will become the only person in U.S. history to be impeached twice. It also appears as though the trial in the Senate would not finish before Donald Trump's term expires on January 20th. That would mean that we would have yet another unique situation of an impeachment for a president that is no longer in office. Thanks for taking the time to tune into Politics in Plain English. If you liked what you heard, could you do me a huge favor and subscribe and maybe even give it a 5-star rating? You can find Politics in Plain English on your favorite podcast provider. The video cast is on my YouTube channel, Justin R. Hibbard. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Hey, it's all the same handle, Justin R. Hibbard. And lastly, I'll try and do a podcast and vodcast once each week, but I do a lot more writing throughout the week. You can subscribe and get my latest article in your inbox at justinrhibbard.substack.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Justin Hibbard, and this is Politics in Plain English.